little thing. There we go. Yep,
They were on now.
We're on.
we're on.
I guess we're on. Welcome to Almost Human Live, everybody.
Smack 'em a gob, everybody. I'm very, very sorry. I won't be able to be in front of the camera today.
There we go. Yep.
Yeah. We're on. All right.
I guess we're on. You gotta mute that.
Hi, everybody. Smack 'em a gob, everybody. All right. So I messed up my leg today. I've been in the hospital, but I'm back home, but I can't sit down. I'm laid up with my leg elevated, but I will be part of the show. And as you can see, I got my picture with me and Carl, man, when he signed all my Rods albums.
Oh, look at that.
That's when you were in Hialeah, Carl.
I was going to say, Ralph, that was in Hialeah, right?
Yeah, I was there. I was there with Brian Wilson.
Yeah, we were recording the 450s album.
Yeah. It was a fun day, man. You were awesome to hang out with.
Yeah, it was fun. It was great. You guys came by.
Yeah, man. Wouldn't have missed it. When we heard you were there, I was like, oh, I'm taking my Rods albums. But anyway, you got a new book now, right?
I do. Yeah. Tales of a Wild Dog.
Wayne, you and Tony got to read it, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't have a hard copy, but your publicist sent me a digital copy to read. And I will be picking up a hard copy because I collect books as well. But I really enjoyed it, man. That was a good read, man. Really was.
Thanks. That's really great to hear. You know, we tried to write it as a book from beginning to end, so it was a read rather than just a bunch of pieces. And so I'm glad to hear that. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and I like it too. I like how you just mentioned, it starts like from the beginning to now, whatever. But I also like the in between stuff where people are actually writing about you. You know, and the time that they spent with you and all that stuff about recording albums and stuff like that. So it's a really fun read.
So that's an interesting thing because Phil, my co-author, like I was really concerned that, I would dictate these chapters. And one of the things that convinced me to work with Phil was he said he would transcribe my audio files. And so there were some moments where he couldn't hear everything, so he used transcription software. I'm like, those are not my words. I was ready to cancel the book twice, just kill it. Because I said, if it's not me telling the story, then what's the point? I did it doing it for my daughter. She has the audio files. I don't care if the book comes out. I'm shocked. I didn't think the book would sell 50 copies. Of course, far exceeded my expectations, thank God. But so that was a bit of a thing, but there was one, we started with one asking for one commentary. And it was so cool, Phil and I were discussing, and he said, it'd be cool to have commentary. But I have to tell you that I have not read the commentary. I was concerned. So people are talking shit about me. I don't know it yet, but I haven't read it, and I was concerned because we had to cut 200 pages from the book. The publisher said it's just way too long. It'll be too expensive. And so that was a horrible task, trying to whittle down 200 pages. I mean, it's 300 pages now, and it was 500 pages. So that was tough, but I didn't want to read the commentary because I was worried that it would color my stories, and it would also influence me. And my the agreement was with everybody. Everybody was told you can say whatever you like, good, bad, or indifferent. You can vent, you can say whatever, it doesn't matter. And I didn't want to go against that. If I read something that was like, oh, that I kind of felt a little stab on that one. Well, I didn't want to, go and say, well, you know what, let's pull that, or let's modify that. I didn't want to be tempted to correct it. So if people are talking shit, I was like, have at it. It was totally uncensored, untouched. And I figured I wouldn't tempt myself, by reading it. So I've yet to read it.
Well, I don't think there's anything bad in there about you. I think everybody is really likes how you haven't changed. Like being in the Rods and everything. You're just that guy that's just a really cool, down to earth guy, and you've been throughout your whole life, basically. That's what I gathered from
And music, sounds, how to get good sounds in the studio.
Yep.
Yeah, I still work on that. I'm working on the new Rods album. We are about halfway through the new Rods album. And
Really?
I'm sitting here by my drums and I'm constantly, experimenting with things, miking, drum heads, different sounds, tunings and whatnot. Constant, never ending battle to get that, sound that's in your head.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we're ever happy with the sounds that we have at the time. We always try to want to improve, right?
Right.
Especially drums. Drums are hard to get,
All the time, yeah.
you know.
So many times I think, why don't I just play electronic drums?
Oh,
The sounds are there. I can only tweak them so much. I'm a perfectionist, and
yeah.
and so that it's the dichotomy is I'm a hack, but I'm a perfectionist. So the hack is never going to get it perfect, but the hack keeps trying to get it perfect, which is the definition of insanity. I want it to be perfect. It's never perfect.
Right.
So I just keep going after it. But by the same token, when I do my drum tracks, and I do them for other people as well, I do my tracks and I turn them in and there's zeroed waves, and I tell everybody, don't move anything, don't touch anything. If you don't like it, I'll replay it, but don't change anything. It is what it is, and if you're not satisfied, I'll be glad to redo it.
Yeah. Have you ever played on an electric kit?
I have.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah,
think?
they're fun to play. They're fun.
Yeah.
It's not real drums.
Yeah.
Plus, when I'm playing an electronic kit, I'm always worried, like, oh my God, this kit was $6,000. And I'm just going to smash the shit out of it in about 20 minutes.
No, you feel like you're going to break them compared
Exactly.
to the real drums. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Feel like they're delicate. And they're not, but that's how I feel. Like
Yeah, they can take a beating, but
yeah.
Yeah, I've been a Rods fan for years, man. I discovered you guys somewhere in the late '80s on a compilation album that came out called Metal Killers, and it had Let Them Eat Metal was the song that was included on it. So I knew the name, but my first introduction that I bought was I found this at a record store, the Rods Live, and I fell in love with you over this, man. Just it's like, wow.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and
well, that's a raw live
album. I live in North Carolina, so I didn't find Rod's albums too easy. It was probably several years going into the CD age when I was able to get, I think High Voltage Records reissued your catalog with the bonus tracks, and I got the whole CD collection like that. And just been a fan, for like I said, for years. And when you guys, I was happy to see you guys reunite, when you did the Vengeance record and all. And then I think it was 2015, I saw you guys for the first time, and that was at Defenders of the Old Fest in Brooklyn.
Oh yeah, one of the worst shows we've ever played.
You had some technical problems, yeah, I remember, and I was thinking, man, I hope they don't cut their set, because it was my first time seeing you guys. You guys and Exciter, I'd seen Exciter a version, but I hadn't seen the true 3-piece.
They were great. We, the guys we were talking with, Dan and Alan, and I'm like, oh my God. And then, about a year later, Alan goes, how you said that was one of your worst gigs? We just had one. And he goes, I know how you feel now. I go, yeah, it was a nightmare. But it was still a cool game.
It was still great to see you, man. And you guys played, you played a bunch of stuff. You still played like about 40, 45 minutes or so. And it was great to see, because I was like, I've never seen the Rods, and I might not ever see them again, but I've seen them now, but I hope to get to see you again sometime.
Yeah, I got to see the Rods once. It was a hurricane relief concert in New Jersey with the Anvil and Twist Sister, the Rods, Raven.
Oh yeah.
That was a great show. I think Johnny Z was who ran that.
He did, and that was a great show. It was a fun show.
Yeah,
I don't mean great for us. I just mean it was a great show. A lot of talent, and everybody came together to for Sandy Hook. So
yeah, great.
Yeah,
it was
that was cool. I remember when that happened. Yeah.
So and I always remember that show. There's a drum solo on YouTube I put up, and my daughter she always tries to film my drum solos, and so she's only 5'6", I think. So she goes, I'm trying to see, and these guys are all big, tall guys, and I can't get in and the guy's like, what's up? And he goes, I'm trying to film. It's my father's drum solo, and so they cleared a path for her so she can record the drum solo. was great.
Wow.
They're like, it's Carl's daughter. Move.
Yeah, they were
Let her
great guys.
through.
They took care of her.
Yeah. So you've done, man. I mean, you were at the start of the whole thrash metal thing. I mean, and you talk about that in the book and all the bands that you worked with in those early days when Johnny Z would bring you in. And I was going to ask you about a couple of albums. One of the ones I was going to ask you about was the Thrasher project, and that was Duck. Something Duck and you put together, right?
It is, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is just now finished. I asked Nate Horton to remix that album because it's just it's never been that's been a real pride and joy of mine, and it's never sounded good to me. It's always sounded, the mix has been thin, and now in the remix I told Nate, I said, this was a project I was really proud of, and yet I was ashamed to play it for people because it just wasn't the album that we did. You could not hear how great some of the performances were. And now it's remixed, and I'm going to look to either I'll put it out on my label or find a label to reissue it. But it sounds unbelievable, and I'm really proud of it now. I want everybody to hear it.
For those out there that don't know what this is kind of an all-star project. This was basically a lot of people that were, in that, was it the Cortland, New York scene, and then you brought in some other people as well. I mean, you've got guys like Cider, TKO. I mean, Kenny Aronson's on here, Mars Cowling. I mean,
yeah, there are people from Florida, from California, or where is Brad Sinsel from? Seattle. There are people from all over, Miami, whatever. But it was a project that when I was young, I listened to Al Cooper's Super Session. That's what gave me the idea. It was he was supposed to do it with Mike Bloomfield, and Mike Bloomfield flaked after a few songs, so he brought Steven Stills in. But it was an album where they brought different musicians in, and I always thought that was really cool, and I wanted to do it. And since I knew so many musicians and everybody was willing to lend a hand, I thought, well, let's do this project. And I can't say enough how I'm finally able to have it as part of my history and my catalog and really be proud of it. These new mixes are just brought the album to life. Anxious for you to hear it since you have the first album and or that version of it, to see what you think of the remixes.
Yeah, I picked it. Someone put it out on CD years ago. I have it on CD as well, but it's probably straight from the same vinyl rip or something, probably.
Yeah,
I think it was an import.
There's a bootleg from Poland as well.
That's probably it. Is that Metal Mind? I think that's the Polish label. Yeah. Another one I was going to ask you about.
Sent me a CD of that. He goes, "Who loves you, brother?" And he said, "I go, hey, I didn't license this."
You gotta love it when you find out through someone sending you something. One of my favorite records too that you played on, that you produced, the Jack Star Out of the Darkness with Rhett Forrester, and you and Gary with the rhythm section along with Gary Driscoll. I bought this. I think I found it in the cutout bin on cassette for like $1 or something one time, and I was like, all right, that's the guy from Virgin Steel. I'll check it out. Fell in love with it, loved it, man. And when as soon as I could find it on vinyl, I bought a copy. And man, it's a smoking album. And I love the story you told in the book about going to, was it France to play the show? And so Rhett Forrester from Riot was the lead singer in the band for this, and you guys were kind of worried about him going AWOL, so you brought Neil Turbin. We had Neil Turbin on a few weeks ago, and he kind of told that story a little bit about going over with you guys, but you went into more detail in the book about it.
Yeah, I that was unbeknownst to me that he came as a backup. I had no idea that he was basically, because we didn't rehearse with Neil, so I had no idea that Neil was there in case Rhett flaked. But Neil's such a great guy. I love Neil, and I'm glad he's doing as well as he is now. I'm really happy for him. He's such a great singer and a great guy, and he kind of got a raw deal in the whole Anthrax thing after that first album.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of Rhett Forrester, you did Gone with the Wind. I just saw where High Roller has reissued that. Did you remix that?
I remastered that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Rhett was a star, man. He was He walked into the room, everybody loved him. What a great voice. We did Le Bourget Breaking Sound Festival with Jack Starr and Gary playing bass. And Paul Kane was a phenomenal guitarist who played on that album. But Rhett live, man, he had the crowd in the palm of his hand. He was a true showman and a great vocalist. He was a star. It's unfortunate that the demons got him, as it does to certain
For
people.
sure.
But man, what a talent Rhett was.
Another one I was going to ask you about, and you talked about it a little bit in the book, was Blue Cheer, The Beast is Back, which is their comeback album. This was like their first album. What, like, was it? I guess it was like 10 or 12 years at that time, maybe.
Yeah, long. Yeah, that was really amazing for me to work with, because what converted me to, like, up until then, when I first started playing, and I talk about it in the book, I had a little Singer portable record player, and I mostly bought 45s. Didn't have any money, couldn't buy albums were only $3, but 45s are 80 cents or something, or whatever. So, well, most of them 45s, all top 40 music when I first started playing, and I taught myself. And I would, but if you can imagine tapping to the drums and then listening to that one little speaker, it's like, good luck. So all of a sudden, after I've been playing for about a year and a half or something, I see Dick Clark and I see Blue Cheer on Dick Clark, and my little black and white TV, the speaker was vibrating, and I went, "Oh my God, that's it. That was it." After that, I just started kicking the shit out of my drums and smashing cymbals and drumsticks and costing myself a lot of money, but that was a life changer for me. So working with them and working with Paul was amazing. He was such a good guy, and Dickie was phenomenal. Dickie was so talented, solid bass player. Didn't play anything complicated, but he was very tight and great sound. So yeah, that was a great experience for me. And Paul Whaley was a very intuitive drummer, but he wasn't a technical drummer. So I had to really pump him up a lot of times. He would get really down on himself and, like, look, man, you're an originator. You're an original. You don't have to sit and overthink things. You just let it go and it'll be great.
Yeah, a friend of mine told me the first time he met Paul was, because this is years later, when Duck had joined and they were starting to tour and pretty regularly. He said he met Paul after the show. He said he goes up and he's talking to Dickie, and Dickie's taking pictures and signing autographs and stuff with people. And he goes, "Where's Paul? I want to meet Paul." And Dickie goes, "Oh, he's probably out back loading his stuff." He said he goes back out and Paul's out there just sweating his balls off, packing his stuff up, trying to load it in the truck. He goes, "Hey, man, can I give you a hand?" He's just, he said, "I'm thinking, man, this dude is like a legend here, and he's having to load his own gear." But you told the story in the book too about seeing when you went to California to record this album for Possessed, Beyond the Gates, and you said you went, and Dickie was like living kind of on hard times, but because you ran into him out there. But it's good to know that once Duck got involved, that they started touring and started doing well again. Because
Totally
I saw him several times in the mid 2000s, and they were always great. I mean, a couple times, 2 times, and they were great both times I saw.
They're one of those bands that just had that magic.
And one of the loudest shows I've ever seen, man. They were in a club, and there was some glass windows in the front of this club, and I thought they were going to blow out. It was so loud.
Dickie wasn't afraid of volume. Duck wasn't afraid of volume, and Paul wasn't afraid to hit those drums. Talented guy.
But what about this Possessed record? Anything you can remember about when you were doing that with those guys? I mean, they were like the first death metal band, really, if you think about it.
I remember a lot of that. That was doing pre-production with them was really interesting. We did this on Easter vacation because they were in high school. So, and this is their second album. So this isn't the first album. This is the second album. They're in high school. And they were, they worked really hard. Obviously, they'd come home from school. I'd wait all day, and they'd come home from school, and then we start rehearsing. Debbie Abonos, who was a wonderful woman who managed them. And the the one thing they had that was they were really tight. Tempos would fluctuate, but the band they would play together. So they knew where they were going to slow down and speed up. So they were very tight. So in the studio it was a challenge to get it tight, but it was they were great guys to work with. And Jeff, I'm so thrilled he's carrying on because he's a great guy, man. He's a tough SOB.
He is. I'm glad they're still going. And I
And
saw
doing
him.
well.
Saw him last year. It was my first time ever getting to see any version of Possessed, and saw that they're going out on tour with Testament here later on this year. So that's great that he's doing full
And we all
tour again.
know, and we all know that touring, unless even touring first class, is challenging. It has its difficulties, but for Jeff touring, like it's got to be really difficult, man. He doesn't miss a beat. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
And when you recorded that album, you made them use a click, and they weren't familiar with using a click because, like you just mentioned, with the fluctuations with the times and stuff like that. And I think in the book you said that you kind of regretted having them use the click on that album, right?
I think so. As I was saying, they really rode the wave of the tempo movement, and not that they weren't tight, but maybe it would have been a better vibe. Maybe, if nothing else, a better experience for the guys. But I have to own my mistakes. I think it would have been easier for those guys if we had just knocked on a click track. And click track, for me, click track is, I don't ever want to play without it, even if I don't even hear it in my headphones until there's a break and I hear the count, so I come back in time perfectly. But it's not, obviously music was long before click tracks. Great music was made, but to me, it's a great tool, and it was something that was important because you could get your delays in time and all, everything that comes with it, punch-ins and so on. So, but yeah, I might not have used a click track for those guys.
What about Exciter, Violence and Force?
Well, those guys are like, they're friends of mine, and I love them dearly. And that was a fun album to do because they're just such great guys. Came in, we had a lot of fun, and and plus they had so many jokes and they had such great sense of humor. People would come in, they go, "Oh, you're from Canada. Oh, do you guys have Burger King up there?" And Dan Beeler, without missing a beat, "No, actually, we have Fish King." And it just, it was great. They were so much fun to work with, and Dan was amazing though. First of all, he's a monster drummer, and talk about kicking the shit out of the drums. Like Dan is all over it to this day. We saw him at that concert we played. Dan's a monster, but his vocal intensity is incredible, and he's balls out all the way. So it was great to work with him. Johnny Z came in and we're doing vocals, and Johnny's on the floor in front of the console. And Chris Bubach and I still, when we answer the phone, we say this to each other, but Johnny's on the floor, and we stop the tape, and I hear, "Ziba, Kyle, what, Ziba, what's that?" Because the way Danny was singing, it almost sounded like he had a compressor, but it wasn't. It was just his voice. So Chris Bubach and I, we call each other, "Ziba, hey, what's up, Chris?" And, because of that, but Johnny was like, "What's that? Ziba."
Yeah, that's another band that was inactive for years, kind of like you guys, and came back, and they've been going full force, especially once John retired, and they brought in Daniel DK, the young guy, and he's in good with all the up and coming metal bands that are coming out now and stuff. So they're out touring like crazy again.
Yeah,
I remember I asked Alan at that Defenders of the Old show when they were doing a little meet and greet before the show, and I was like, "Did you ever see yourself doing this again?" He goes, "No." He'd sold all his gear, just never. And that was, like I said, that was 2015. So I mean, they're still going strong. Yeah, I'm hoping they'll do a new record.
Yes, that would be great. They have John. John was even when I worked with him. Alan and Dan were really tight. John was always the little on the outside, a little thorn in their side. If I don't know if that's correct, but there was definitely not quite as tight as Dan and Al. But
yeah, I mean, John had a version of Exciter going there for before those guys got back together with him. But I don't think they played a whole lot or did anything, you know.
But John just contacted me a few weeks ago, and he's got a new band together.
Wow.
So I'm looking forward to hearing it. I'm glad he's playing. John's a monster, you know, in his own right.
That's cool. How about Overkill's debut, Fear the Fire?
Yeah.
I love the story about this album cover in the book as well. I mean, that's real, people. That's not Photoshop.
It's not AI.
Alex's friend, the photographer, had a place in the country, and they wanted this. They had this idea. So that bonfire is freaking enormous, and there they are. You know, that's standing in front of it. It was a great photo, and no Photoshop, as you said, no AI, no Photoshop. But that was a great. You know, when they came in, there were some issues there. I think I mentioned in the book. You know, and I try not to. There's no reason to be overly negative, so I'm not trying to bash anybody. But when they came in, Rat, who's a great guy, I love Rat, but he came in and he was young, and so he went out and partied the first night, and they came in and his legs were shot. You know, when you're playing drums, it's an athletic event. You know, like I'm going to be practicing when we hang up. I'll be on my pads. Because we have a show coming up July 6th in Sweden for Time to Rock Festival, and I need to prepare now. You know, so he was out, and so he came in and playing fast double bass. Your legs, you know, lactic acid builds up, and you cramp up, and you're done. And that's what happened to him. So I had to talk to him and just said, you know, no more partying until you're done. And sometimes that's hard for young musicians to hear because, like, dude, we're having a great time. And like, we're not here to have a great time. We're here to make a great record. So he got it together and pulled it off. And there were some internal issues. You know, Gustafson was the guy who was a monster player and still is a monster player, but he didn't really mesh with the other guys when I was working with him. And so whatever the case was, they had some little dust ups. You know, but we got through it and we got the album done. But you can definitely see the writing on the wall. But he was with them for a while.
Yeah, he did 4 or 5 albums with them or so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great. And that's still Feel the Fire is still my favorite Overkill record. I go back to that before I go to any album.
And Blitz was like Rhett Forster. Blitz walked into a room, and I saw him at Metal Elysian show I played maybe 5 years ago. He was on the phone and he looked up and he just jumped up and gave me a hug. I mean, he's the same guy, down to earth, but he's a rock star. You know, he walks into the room, he's got the charisma, but he's also he's not egoed out.
Yeah.
Wow. Another one I was going to ask you about, the debut by Hellstar, Burning Star. I love the story in the book. You kind of solved the mystery about the Bill Lionel thing that you've given him the name. Because I asked James that. So James Riviera is the singer in this band. And on this album, he's listed as Bill Lionel. And the first time I ever met him, I was like, why does it say Bill Lionel? And as a matter of fact, he signed my CD and he signed it from Bill. He signed Bill on it. And yeah, you said that you thought that James Riviera wasn't a good rock name and he should be called Bill Lionel. I don't know. I just think James Riviera is a cooler name than Bill Lionel.
I think Bill Lionel is like, where the hell did that come from? I think this guy's made that up because I don't remember ever saying that. But whatever, maybe I did. I just can't imagine Bill Lionel being that's a rock star name over James Rivera. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, those guys, they call me dad. I call them son, James, and
they were pretty young. They were pretty young at the time as well.
They were very young. Yeah. What was the drummer's name? I can't think of Oscar. Larry. I think Larry and James. I called them son.
Yeah. Tom Rogers, Hector Pavon.
Hector.
Paul, yeah, Hector.
The drummer. He was a nice guy. I honestly don't remember the other guys. But
yeah, it's cool. They're another band that's still going. I saw them a couple years ago. I saw them at Hell's Heroes a couple years ago, and they played this whole album that night, and I was like, that's just great, man, because I love that record.
They're still going, and Larry has another band called Santa Obscurata. I can never pronounce that name, but
yes, I can't either. But it's fantastic
Yeah, they're really good.
and stuff. Although it's in Spanish, so I don't understand what the
Right.
lyrics are about. But it's a great album. You sent me a copy of it, and I was wow, blown away.
One more I wanted to ask you about. Well, three more. So you did. A lot of people might not know, but Carl did the first three Anthrax records. He did Fistful of Metal, and he did the EP, which is Armed and Dangerous, the first one with Joey, and then Spreading the Disease.
Yeah.
And I love the story you told in the book about how they found Joey, because I had heard different versions of that over the years, but Joey was in that Bible Black band with Duck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, you know, those Bible Black recordings they surfaced about a couple of years ago. Finally,
Yes.
I know a friend of mine has a little label, and he was talking to Duck. Well, we were talking to Craig at first about it because he had me talking to Craig when Craig was living, and we were Facebook friends, and nobody could decide who owns the rights to it, you know. And I don't know. It seems like I was glad to see it finally see the light of day, because everybody's kind of passed on a lot of the people that are, you know, that were involved.
It wound up. I was involved in licensing that from Duck, and that was really the case. You know, last man standing. Duck winds up with the rights, so we licensed it from him.
It's good to hear. It's got people out there that might not know. It's Bible Black, and it was a New York based band, but it's got all their demos on this collection, and it's Joey Belladonna sings on it. I think he was the last singer they had, maybe. Mm-hmm. But Jeff Finholt, who was the televangelist who was in Black Sabbath for 15 minutes, and Eric Adams from Manowar, and it's pre-Manowar, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty amazing lineup. And Gary Driscoll from Elf and Rainbow, Craig Gruber from Elf and Rainbow.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it's good stuff. But so the Anthrax, so what was it working with Anthrax? I mean, and they were young guys when you went in with them as well.
And then you saw two different versions of the band too, because you saw the first one with Neil Turbin and Dan Lilker, and then you got the newer version with Frank and Joey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so
was Joey's audition? Did he really go in and sing "Oh Sherry"? Was that the song you did? It was Journey.
Joey came in, and the guys weren't in the studio. They were, if I can sort of illustrate this, the way it worked was a layered thing. So imagine it was a bathroom, actually, and there was a door to the studio. So when you're in the control room, where the console is, behind you, the back, is a bathroom, which led to a set of offices and a conference room. So those guys were in this bathroom, and they had the door open to crack, and Joey was singing. And and Johnny and I were working with Joey, and Joey, it was new. Like, he wasn't used to singing that tempo. Nobody was used to singing that kind of tempo, especially somebody who like Joey had been singing, Journey stuff. Mm-hmm. So took a little bit, but he got it. The guys were behind the door, and after he sang for maybe 10 minutes or so, the guys were like, the door opened, and they're like, that's it, he's in. It was really clear that his voice and their music was something unique. And John Bush, great as he is, to me, Joey is the voice of Anthrax.
Yeah, I feel the same. I love John and Armored Saint. That's where that's his band. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Joey belongs in Anthrax for sure in my book. But
when we had
what would you say?
When we had Neil Turbin on a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about how him and Dan really did not get along very well. Did they really have like any arguments or stuff, anything in the recording of the first album?
In the first album, my goal was because they weren't tight. So it was really a discovery process. It was a discovery that Scott was the wicked rhythm guitarist. So explaining to Dan that, Scott's not playing any leads. You're not playing any rhythms. So once that was digested, and they were cool about it, Danny was cool. Danny's a monster player. And Scott, what can you say? Scott's an amazing rhythm player. So once we got past that, but we were really focused on, I was focused on trying to make sure it was tight. Charlie came in day one, knocked it out of the park. He was a 1 or 2 take guy. Like he had his shit together and didn't, it was, I said, you're going to be the modern drummer, and you're going to be highly recognized as a drummer that everybody loves. But there wasn't enough time for it. But it was clear that Neil didn't mesh with those guys. It was clear they didn't, like, it just seemed like Charlie and Scott in particular did not really, they didn't agree with Neil. And so, and because of the time it took to get things done, and we had little to no time, and because I should have been a little more on top of my scheduling, Neil kind of got shorted on the vocal, which I've apologized to him a million times. And he's forgiven me, but he did a great job. But he would have done even more had we had a little more time. So, but there was writing on the wall. I didn't really see Dan and Neil, have any issues. But Neil's, he's a bright guy. He's an opinionated guy, strong-willed. When you get a few of those people together in a room and they're not on the same page, that's what, that's as much as there's tension, there's also a synergistic thing that happens because everybody is pushing in the same direction. They might be forcing compromise, and that compromise sometimes makes it great. So, and then when they came back in with Frankie was green. So we had to work with Frankie and give him some time, and he got it together. He was a great fit for the band. It was weird though that Dan was gone, and it was, I wasn't surprised about Neil being gone because Neil's Neil. He's his own guy, and wasn't going to kiss their asses, at least particularly Scott and Charlie.
Yeah.
So I wasn't surprised. And I'd heard rumors on the road that, there was more and more alienation. I was surprised about Danny because Danny is so soft-spoken, but I could see where, Charlie and Frankie being related, I could see where, that would be the sensible thing for them, the logical thing.
Right. And I also thought it was interesting that you told Dan to play with the pick because I guess he was playing with his fingers, so you told him to play with the pick. And a lot of people frown on bass players playing with the pick. So why did you really push him to do that?
Well, I think bass players, most really great bass players can do both. They're just like anything. You learn the disciplines. But Dan was coming in. This is a whole new style of music. It was really like I say about the changing of the guard. This was a lot of musicians, and then maybe even a year or two older than these guys, but they were like totally, what is that? But we're trying to get it super tight. When you got someone like Scott who's super tight playing the rhythm, and you want that because if it's not tight, it's not punchy. So my thing was, Dan, you really should be able to play. You're playing this fast music, hard to articulate with your fingers. So if you can learn to play with the pick, you're going to make this tighter, at least for the recordings. Live, none of that matters. So much noise going on. Doesn't matter if you're in the ballpark, it's tight, but not under the microscope of a recording studio. And so that was my incentive. And when we played Defenders of the Old, or at what is it? Not Defenders of the Old. What is the played Reggie's? I'm trying to think of what
Ragnarok Fest.
Ragnarok, right? Yeah. And I'm sitting there, and it's a low stool. We're in the other part of Reggie's, and Dan comes in, and Dan's tall, and I want to talk to you. He's very serious. I want to talk to you. And I thought, oh man, he's just going to go off on me now because, whatever happened in the studio, he's going to bitch at me and call me names and just yell at me. And I'm looking up at him going, okay, brace yourself, pal. And he goes, I have to thank you for insisting I play with the pick. It totally changed things for me. I was like, okay, well, you're certainly whatever here. Thank God you're not going to punch me.
Yeah, a couple people have put in here on the chat that Danny was too tall for the band, and that was one of the rumors was that Neil wanted him gone because he was too tall, but Neil shot that down, so it's not true. But and then they had you mentioned in the book that they had Matt Fallon. They brought Matt Fallon in on vocals. Did he actually record for the EP, and then they just decided that wasn't right because working on
What
the Arthur
happened?
Davis EP?
I actually have a set of that. We did pre-production with Matt. Came in for a week, and he was young, and I want to say I don't want to like cast aspersions on the guy, but he was young, and he just wasn't quite as focused as he could have been. So at the end of that week, I made the comment to the guys. I said, listen, this guy, we're trying to get you a major label deal. This guy isn't going to get you that. So they said, get Johnny on the phone. So I went through the bathroom, out of the control room, through that little hallway bathroom, into the conference room, called Johnny. And Johnny was, and I miss him so much. He was such a great friend and mentor and so on. But he in 2 seconds, he goes, okay, put the guys on the phone. So I go back to the bathroom, into the control room. And I go, guys, Johnny wants to talk to you. So they go through the bathroom, into the conference room. And they weren't in there 2 minutes, 3 minutes. They come back in. Johnny wants to talk to you. So I go through the bathroom, into the conference room, and I pick up the phone. Hey, John, what's up? And he says, put him on a bus, and hangs up the phone. And that was it. I'm like, thanks, Johnny. Now I've got to go tell this kid, got to go home. And so there we were with nobody. And I really credit those guys because they were focused on being the best band they could be. And, they took me at my word at what I was saying. And then there they were in the middle of recording, the EP and getting ready to do the new album. And they had no singer. So put out the word and immediately called Duck, and Duck said, we'll call Joey. And I called Joey, and we brought him in, and that's it.
Yeah, rest is history. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Matt Fallon ended up like 3 years later in Skid Row and ended up getting booted out of that and replaced by Sebastian Bach.
Shocker.
Yeah. So he must have just never got his mess together. But, yeah.
Certainly had opportunities.
Yeah. So by the time they went in to do Spreading Disease, they were a pretty tight band by then, I'm sure.
They were tight. We all had a really good working relationship. Scott and I really worked quickly on the rhythms, and if I heard something, we just start right in, and it was easy. With Danny playing solos, Danny would stand on the opposite side of the console between the speakers, and he would play. And it got so he would just see my face. Okay, do it again. Like I wouldn't even have to say anything to him. He would know when I wanted him to redo it solo. So it went really fast. Charlie came in and knocked it out immediately. Like it was so fast for Charlie. And so it was good. And then Frankie was a little bit of a rough start for him. As he says in his book, I gave him a shot of whiskey, to calm him down. And which, again, I don't remember that. I don't drink, so I don't know that I would have had any whiskey anywhere. But I certainly did my best to calm him down and make him comfortable. And Frankie's such a great guy. And he did really well. It's not easy to be in the studio for the first time because, as we all know, it's you're under that microscope, and what you're playing live, you get away with a lot of sins. Suddenly in the studio, hit that string a little too hard. Suddenly there's a clack, there's a click, a lot of issues that you have. And suddenly then you become so self-conscious that now you're playing you're intimidated. So now that causes more restraint. It just it goes from bad to worse sometimes. And he was able to get it together.
Cool.
Have you ever worked with any band that had a drummer or just like, this guy's not going to work out?
No, I've had a couple things where I wound up playing drums on a track,
Oh, really? All right.
But not totally replaced. I've had to, which is, I always say it's not Acme School of Music. You can't come to the studio and then expect me to teach you, what's going on. I can't, I'd love to, but there's no time. So I've actually, a couple people have had to go home and be replaced. In fact, Duck on the Apollo Raw album, Chris was a really talented songwriter, but in the studio, he's another case of he just didn't gel with the guys, and his playing was nowhere near their playing. So I brought Chris in with Bill McEwen, and those two guys tore it up on the Apollo Raw album. But that, he had to go home. Chris had to go home, and that was tough. But there were the inner workings of that band were such that he didn't mesh with the band anyway. He was probably happy to go, and they were probably happy to see him go. So, but there have been a couple of instances like that. But no, I never had to replace the drummer other than like I said, I kind of let me play this track. Usually they'll say, "Could you play this track?" They're having trouble with it in the studio, and for time reasons, rather have me knock it out.
Yeah.
So,
have you heard that album, Wayne, the Apollo Raw?
No.
You should check them out. I think you dig it. Kind of proggy, kind of Queensryche kind of influence. Yeah,
that's a good description. And that band, I was hired by Shatter Records to produce that. Record company went out of business, so I wound up buying all the rights to it and finishing the album. But now I now have 6 hours to mix the album. So I mixed that album in 6 hours. So there I am, very low volume, and mixing the whole album in 6 hours. It was really a daunting task, but it turned out pretty well.
Yeah, you mentioned Shattered Records. One I didn't dig out and bring in here was a band, Attila. That's a really good record. That's another one to check out if anybody out there hadn't checked out. It's just hard driving heavy metal. They look cool. They sounds great. Good stuff.
Yeah. I can't remember. I think we recorded that with Alex Periel at Significa, right? It's up here on my wall, but I can't.
Yeah, Shattered Records didn't last. It didn't last very long.
No.
They did a couple of the Paul Di'Anno Battle Zone records. I think maybe that was one of their bigger name artists that they had on the label. But I was glad when you guys reissued the Rod stuff on vinyl through HR High Roller, because I didn't have this, and I was glad to get this, even though I have original copy of the first album from on Arista. But it was cool to get this, even though it's a lot of the same stuff, but it's really cool.
High Roller, they are such a great label, and they are perfectionists. They found photos David and I hadn't seen, or remembered seeing. They really leave no stone unturned. Plus the recordings you have to have. They insist on remastering from the original masters. I mean, they put me through hell finding everything to get that whole thing together. But
so you did have the masters. You did still have the masters for this.
I've been the archivist of the band, so I have everything. Like even in my book, the first set of drums I had when I was 13, and I brought this I'd say sleazy. He was wasn't a sleazy guy. He was a merchant, but the drum set he knew was kind of a piece of crap Japanese drum set, but nonetheless, I was thrilled to have it. And but I brought the installment work to where my mother was working at the window at the post office and kind of coerced her into signing it. But I found that receipt in doing the book. I found that receipt. So unbelievable. But I say, I've archived everything. So I have all kinds of tapes. That's why I have so many things like Matt Fallon recording with Anthrax. I have that recording. I have stuff with lots of Anthrax stuff, lots of things unreleased, Rod stuff, tons of Rod's live stuff. A lot of the bands I've worked with, Overkill, whatever. I have a lot of stuff. I should look into licensing some or some.
You should. Bands, I mean, it's good that you did, because there's so many bands they'll put reissues out, and there'll be stuff on that's not on that should be on the reissue that's not there that fans know about. Fans go, "Oh yeah, well you didn't put this on there." Like, "Well, I don't have the tape," and like, "Well, it's on YouTube." Somebody put it on YouTube.
Carl probably has it. He collects everything.
I put it on YouTube.
That's like you guys, like you saw about Relive. You put this Metal Will Never Die live box set out. Some great live recordings of the Rods on this that came out a couple years ago. So yeah,
those are all recordings that part of the million recordings I have. But they did a great job putting that together.
I hadn't
And
got
then
the newest Canedy record. I got the first one. I need to get the newest, the latest one. But yeah, this was good stuff as well. Is this stuff that you just had that you knew wasn't going to be right for the rods, and you just wanted to do something a little different?
It was, David was doing solo albums, and I was like, I'm waiting around to do another Rod's album. You know what? I'll do it. And I wanted an album. I wanted to make sure that it was an album that I had written all the songs 100%, because everybody thinks, oh, you're a drummer. So like over here to my left, I have like 5 guitars here. Like I've been playing guitar almost as long as I've been playing drums. So not that I'm a good guitarist, but I write on guitar. And so I wanted to have songs that I'd written 100% of lyrics, melody, guitar parts, and so on. And that I owned the rights to, because a couple of the songs I wanted to redo, but I assigned my rights to MCA, so I was sharing the publishing there. I didn't want to touch those. So that's kind of how I brought this thing together. Some new songs, some songs I wanted to remake, and that was it. So, but the next Canedy album, the Warrior album, which I'm really proud of, that was a band effort with Tony Garuba, Charlie Russello, and Mike Santosiero. Mike Santosiero and I have a new project with John Hahn, who plays guitars on my Headbanger album. And Billy Sheehan's on a couple of tracks, and he may be on a few more on that album. And it's that we're doing. And I'm really proud of this album that's turning out. We'll see what everybody thinks when it's done, but I'm pretty excited about it. And I'm excited about the new Rod's album. I can't believe we're halfway done with the new album. Pretty exciting.
What's the ETA on that one? Do you know?
We'd like to turn that in by August. So
is that going to be through SPV as well?
That'll be this Rattle the Cage was through Massacre, and they've already optioned the next album, so it's going to be through Massacre.
Cool.
We did a really good job on this last album, one of our best-selling albums since the first album.
Wow.
When I had you on my podcast, we were talking about the 450s. What's going on with them?
Funny you mentioned that, because the 450s are no more. The singer has a business. It's a shame, but the singer has a business, and it's just blowing up. Now he's also he had started Miami-Dade. He started with doing ultrasound machines repairing, and then that turned into, after 5 years, getting accredited for a school, and it blew up into this huge thing. Eventually they went bankrupt. Now he started a new company, and it's just doing great. And he just doesn't have the time to work on a new 450s, but he's super talented, the singer Rhett, who was in Young Turk. Great, one of the best lyricists, and he is so fast, and so his lyrics are so interesting. So, but the two guys, the Jacobs brothers, they have St. James, and that we had that, which was an album that I wound up playing on everything. They told me I was like the Spinal Tap drummer. Like their drummer would always explode, always. I don't know whatever would happen with those guys in St. James. Like one time they brought in a drummer, and we were getting ready to record. And while we were recording, he had a little TV, and he would be on the phone with his mom, placing bets. Like he was more concerned about the score of the games and the bets he'd place. So they're like, "Listen, dude, we'll see you." And then another guy came in, and he was a really good drummer, but we took photos in the morning, and we were starting to record that night. And his girlfriend, I put it up on YouTube, like Irate Girlfriend. It's, you hate those guys. What are you doing up there? You better answer the phone now. I mean it. And she was going off, and it was just too funny because kept recording, and she thought we were listening, and we weren't. It was voicemail. But when I got those, I recorded them and just put them up a year or two ago. They're really funny. But he didn't last. He went home that night. He listened to her messages, and she got him on the phone. "Michael, you pick up that phone now, Michael. I'm serious, Michael." And that's the message she left. I'm thinking, boy, this guy, holy cow.
Someone's whipped.
He's got to go home and get his testicles back.
Wow, geez, man.
But so anyway, I wound up playing drums. And then another time we did pre-production, and we were in the studio, and the day before we're recording, the drummer gets the worst flu ever, which I wound up getting, and I got so sick from it. But he went home. He was so sick, he left. So he didn't record a note or a song. So I come downstairs, because my studio was in Utica and we're doing a timeshare, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And I came downstairs from to the studio, and they still talk about how he's lying under the console listening to the takes. But because I had done pre-production, I knew all the songs. So I went out and played the whole album with St. James, Crimes of the Heart. Well, I had the worst flu, and then I would go lie under the console and go back out and do another song. That was brutal. But anyway, St. James, those two guys have written an album, and I just recorded one song and sent it in yesterday. And so we're in the process of recording a new St. James album.
Wow, geez, well, you're a busy man.
I think that's who Ralph said I think you were in the studio with them when he met you, maybe in Florida
for the 450s. That was a great, that because everything's done remotely. It was a great experience, and Ralph was there, but we were recording live. Like we would work it out. They had basic arrangements. I would contribute whatever, and we would knock it out and live. And those are the takes, and you can hear the feel. There's such a great groove because we're all pulling those songs together. And when you're focused like that, when I'm recording here, I know that if I screw up, I can go back to the top or I can punch in somewhere. It's not the same thing. But when you're playing with the band, you're trying to all find your parts and lock in and get that feel. And that's what we did on the 450s. And I think that's what gives it such a killer feel. Yeah. Because you don't have that anymore. You're not in the same room and you're not in that same direction. Like if somebody's recording a guitar part, well, they might be thinking of whatever or just, whatever's going on. They're playing to the drum track and the bass track. But when you're all in that same room, you don't want to let anybody down. You want to serve the song. So it's a whole different energy. That's why I think a lot of the early recordings, and my friend who would come to my studio and he would say, you have so much technology, but why is it the early records sound so great to me? I go, it's because they're in a room with baffles around them. They knew how to play the song from the beginning to the end without any mistakes. And then they worked together as a band. And that synergy makes the song powerful and energetic. And you don't care if there's not enough 5K on the snare drum. You don't care. You don't notice it. It's the whole energy of that record and that recording. And that in fact, you have a group of talented people performing that song live, essentially.
Yeah. I was looking at behind you. You have all your albums that you've worked on, produced behind you. And one of our viewers here, Count Ralphus, he said, I bought that EXE record I see on Carl's wall. They were supposed to play locally, but canceled the day of the show, and I never heard about them again. But they were on Shattered Records as well, correct?
They were.
Just a thrash band.
I think we recorded it in Tampa, if I'm not mistaken. Good guys, talented guys. Yeah, it's a shame that the band's on Shattered Records. It was a shame that company folded.
Yeah, just got handed a bad deal, I guess, with that all around. So couple of just questions, Rod's questions. What's your favorite?
Wait, sorry, 1 second. All these albums behind me on the wall. Mm-hmm. I think you just showed half of them right there.
Yeah, no, I did.
Yeah,
I did.
I got a good portion of them. Yeah. So, what's your favorite Rod's album that you've recorded, and what's your favorite tour that you guys did?
Well, those are good questions. I can give you everyone's my baby. It's my, they're all my children, and I can't choose one over the other. Bullshit, but I don't, it's hard. I think the first album, the Rock Hard album, that was blood, sweat, and tears. When we were recording, I have a journal or actually a little calendar book, and we were on the road 63 days straight away from home. Now we're living on $5 a day, and our bass player had to buy cigarettes out of that. That's per diem was $5. So you're eating not a lot of food, and you're eating the cheapest possible thing. And we would all get one motel room, and any other friends who might show up, and we were all in the same room. And that's how we lived. That's how we lived, and we were away all that time. So in between gigs, we would go to the recording studio. A lot of times we'd hang around because Chris Bubach was getting studio time, and he was coercing and blackmailing other students to give up their time so that we could record. And so we had to carry our 2-inch tapes, which if you've ever carried a 2-inch tape, they're heavy. And so when you're carrying 4 of them, they're really get heavy. And we would call it the coin toss as opposed to the coin toss. Whoever lost had to carry the freaking tapes through the hotel. And there was one hotel room that was just, we stayed in grade Z hotels. And there was one that had the longest hallway, and then it turned and it was another, and I lost. So I'm carrying these tapes to the hotel room so we keep them safe. And we just got laughing our asses off. And we're laughing. I'm like, I'm dying. I can't breathe. And yet I'm carrying these tapes. But I mean, we had a great time. But we also, we really focused on that first album and we did it ground up. And when it came time to mix, we were calling friends, girlfriends, friends. Can you contribute like another $45 so we have an extra hour to mix? Like that's how we were getting that album done. So the memory of that and the fact that the album to me holds up today, the first album. There's something about that first album. So that, it would say that's one of my favorites. Rattle the Cage is probably second on the list, the latest album.
Very cool. Now, somebody in the comment mentioned. Go ahead. You take.
I was going to say, Wild Dogs has always been my personal favorite. But when you talked in the book about you weren't happy with the production on it and all. But I mean, I think it sounds pretty good. But I guess you're the one doing it. You knew what you wanted it to sound like.
I know. I think there's some of the best songs I've written on Wild Dogs, and same for David. Some great songs on that album, great Rod songs. So when I say I'm not happy with it, I think that's probably my, I think we had such great songwriting on that.
Hot to trot, too hot to stop. Great song, man. Such a great song.
But the Wild Dogs album, Martin Pearson was supposed to, and Chris Sangrides and I, later in life before he died, we became friends. We played a festival in Holland and we became friends, and we talked about how he was presented to us, you could have him produce the album. And like Chris Sangrides, what has he done? Tigers of Pantang. So I'm young and cocky and stupid. And I go, well, we don't want to sound like Tigers of Pantang. Now, I hadn't heard Tigers of Pantang. And I was just like, we don't want to sound like Tigers of Pantang. And, that came back to bite me as a producer because other bands, we don't want to sound like the Rods. Like, come on, you couldn't possibly sound like the Rods. So, but at the time, and Chris Sangrides would have been great, but Martin Pearson was an engineer, worked with Crocus, and we didn't know they'd fired him. But he came in, and if anybody who's seen me play knows, I don't hit the drums lightly. I'm pretty aggressive on the drums. He made me play so hard that I bent my bass drum beater. That's how hard I had to play. And the drum heads were all loose to the point where there was no tone there, just thud. And I had to play them so hard that I was clubbing the drums. So it was very unpleasant to play. The guitar sound, a lot of 2K in it. It wasn't fat and chunky.
What was the reason there for that with the drum heads?
He wanted, he was playing, Carl, I want the drum so that the floor bass drum tom is the lowest. Like, what the heck are you talking about?
That sounds like shit. It doesn't even have a sound.
Right. And so that was it. That was his thing. And that's, so he never, I'm like, and I didn't want to do it with anybody else. I wanted us to continue the guerrilla warfare that we had done on the first album with Chris Bubach. Now, Chris Bubach he did the first Metallica album, but Chris Bubach has done gold and platinum albums. He's, worked with Mariah Carey, he's worked with, all these great artists, Whitney Houston. It wasn't like he was a hack. We knew he was a great up-and-coming engineer.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
So anyway, I wanted to do that. The record company, they didn't trust us. So they brought in Martin Pearson, who knew less about engineering than I did in a lot of ways. So, and producing. So anyway, that's why when I say something about Wild Dogs not being my favorite, I love the material, I love the album, but it was a very unpleasant way to record an album. And like I said, for me to play, I just clubbing the drums, and for me to bend a bass drum beater, like my drum tech was like, what the hell? Like, you got to play that hard. I go, yeah, that's what he wants. So no consideration to what how the style I played. He just wanted the way he wanted it. So anyway, so much for that.
So your favorite tour that he did, was that probably the Iron Maiden tour?
You know, I would say that's a pretty fair assessment. Because that was 30 days all through UK.
Were they on Number the Beast, or was that Killers?
That
Was that
was
Dickinson?
Beast, yeah, Beast on the Road. Mhm.
Okay, Bruce Dickinson. Okay.
When he just came into the band. But you know, I thought some of the dates we did with Ozzy and Def Leppard, they were fantastic. You know, they were a lot of fun. And Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance, that we did all through the South. That was great. And I go out and watch them every night. And Dave Holland and I corresponded for years, like with snail mail. He was a great guy. But David and I were just commenting about how, you know, I want my drum riser like Dave's was in Screaming for Vengeance. I don't know if you saw that show, but the drum riser was like a story high. Like those guys, without monitors, they wouldn't even hear the drums. It was so high in the air they couldn't see him. I don't know how whoever thought of that as being a good way for a band to perform, and they did it. They were great. But that whole setup, they had two of those stage setups. So one had to go the day before to set up for the following, so they could get there the next day, and then they'd take that one down that night and move it ahead the next day. So they had two stage setups. But that was a great tour as well. And I always remember that because my drum riser was 8x8 and 4-inch channel. And our road crew, one of the gigs we played, I only had enough room because the stage setup was so big that I only had enough room for 2 inches of my drum riser to be on the stage. The other 2 inches were hanging over, and the guys were now separated by my drum set. And when the road crew had to stand in front and make sure my drum riser didn't vibrate off the stage.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's crazy.
So on that tour, Tony, will you give me a moment here? You know, put yourself on mute. Are you done now?
Yeah, go for it.
On that tour, you said Joe Elliott wouldn't talk to you or anything. Have you ever talked to him since at all?
I haven't. Yeah.
Really?
On that, well, that was the, yeah, we didn't, you know, we never talked. I mean, on the whole thing with Ozzy, because in the Ozzy, we're doing those dates in the dressing room. You had to, like, we got locked down. So it wasn't that easy to talk to anybody. Ozzy didn't want anybody in the hallway, you know. So,
yeah.
But, you know, when I saw him at the Marquee, you know, he came through our dressing room or not at Hammersmith Odeon. And, you know, he was, yeah, but he was young. He was just getting the success. So,
yeah, because that's still early on in their career. So I'm surprised that he would be like that, you know. But then,
that like High and Dry?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Because that was,
but, you know,
that's, yeah.
You know, they could have, you know, I have to say that, you know, maybe he's looking at me going, yeah, fuck that guy. Sorry, I don't know if I can say that.
You can say whatever you want.
But, you know, he could have looked at me and go, yeah, what's this asshole doing? And, you know, why is he looking at me like that? I was like, he was in our dressing room and I said, hi, and he didn't speak. So sometimes that happens, and it could be a miscommunication. So I hate to.
Yeah.
You know,
what about the rest of the band? No, was the rest of the band cool with you, or you didn't talk to them either?
I didn't see the rest of the band at that time.
Oh, okay, wow. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in the chat here, I've seen Man of War mentioned a few times. And there's a funny story in the book with Joey DeMaio wanting to fight you. And he goes outside and he ends up, you want to tell that story?
Well, it's not really my story to tell. Walter O'Brien tells it in the book, and he says it's one of his favorite stories. So, quoting Walter O'Brien, you know, I think we had used Eric's real name, something in some magazine.
Yeah.
And you know, David had grown. You know, David had known them longer. I knew Duck and Joey, so that's where I learned about Joey, and then we worked together for a while. But Joey was upset and he wanted to fight us, and there were press people there, and so for whatever reason he wanted to have a fist fight, and we were like, seriously? So he goes, come here, come on, let's walk down here. So he walks down and he jumps over this wall, which was only 3 feet high, right?
Right.
And on the other side, it was 8 feet. So Walter O'Brien finds that hysterical. And, you know, it was one of those things where we were young and whatever. And Joey's a passionate guy.
Yeah. Are you still friends with him today, or does he still want to beat you up?
I don't think he wants to beat me up. No, I mean, we're civil.
Yeah.
We're cool.
I saw Rock did his podcast recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chris Flood on here says that he saw the rods open for Man of War.
Yeah.
He said, I think I saw the rods open for Man of War. He thinks it, so not sure.
Is
You
that
guys
true?
did some shows together.
You never opened for
Yeah.
Man of War.
I don't think that happened.
Could have got mixed
Because when
up.
I might, and maybe thinking of a different show, because I was with Man of War through the whole genesis, writing the songs, writing the album, doing the demo. And but there was one gig, and I don't remember what happened, but I didn't play the gig. And so we never opened for Man of War. Probably should have.
Yeah, right. And then Count Ralphus says supposedly there was a little controversy over the Exciter Violence and Force album cover. Do you have any recollection about that?
Yes. What does that look like again?
I don't know. Tony has it. There you go.
Yeah. The hand breaking in the door.
Yep. Yes. Johnny, there was some talk about, it's like whatever it was with the hand, whether it was because it was black or because it was someone coming in to rape somebody or violent. There was some concern about that. But back then, everything, just like with the rods, would Let Them Be Metal. Like, talk about a Spinal Tap album cover, and that
totally.
looked like someone. Yeah, I was gonna say, there we go, we got that. So that was.
Can't see her. What she's got? She's got a banana with a chrome banana in her hand.
Chrome dildo in there, yeah, vibrator.
Yep.
Yeah, you talk about that in the book too. That was a good story.
Chiquita
but
dildo.
I mean, so I mean that, the 80s, you can't really go back to that time. So with the Exciter album, but there was a concern about it. But nobody died and everything was cool.
Yeah. Chris Flood said that he thought you guys opened for Man of War. He said he thought it was in Staten Island, he says. So evidently he was back in those days, maybe.
One of the gigs we played in Staten Island was a memorable gig for me, but that was with Vandenberg and Metallica. And that was when now Johnny Z and I were really good friends right up until he died. We would talk 2 or 3 times a week, and he was going to write the foreword to my book and tried so hard, but he was just not well enough to do it. And I finally said, John, just let it go. It's okay. But Lars and I were talking. Lars is eating a salad, and he's like, we're thinking of new management. We're thinking of leaving Johnny. What do you think about this? And I felt I felt disloyal in one hand, saying that it might be the best move for them. And on the other hand, it was the right move. I was being honest. I thought the right move for them. But that might be what he's thinking, because we did that show. It was us, Metallica, and Vandenberg. I don't remember who else was on the bill. So
Man of War was on that bill. He said he saw that show too. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Hey, that's cool. If he has a good memory of it, I'm happy. I'm part of it.
It was a great show.
Carl, when you saw Metallica back in those days, did you ever think that these guys could be the biggest metal band in the world when they are just one of the biggest bands in general?
Yeah. When we played Lemoore, Lars borrowed my pedals. Like, they had nothing. Chris would tell me how they would sleep on the floor of the studio, and Chris Bubats, the engineer, and how Chris really didn't like metal. He was not a metal guy. Obviously, he went on to engineer and record all these people, Whitney Houston and Spyro Gyra, lots of gold platinum with Spyro Gyra. So he didn't like metal. Like he says, he laughs about it now. He said, I was trying to dial out all the frequencies in the guitar that were the ones you want. He goes, I just didn't like it. I didn't like the whole metal thing. But he called me when he was recording Metallica, and he said, there's something about this band. Now he'd worked with us, he'd worked with Man of War, he worked with a lot of bands. He didn't say anything special about any of those bands. But for Metallica, he felt there was something special. Johnny felt there was something special. And the crowds reacted to the band and the music. So did I think they'd be the biggest metal band? No. But when we played Le Bourget in France, and I was standing in the crowd with James and Lars and watching Gary Moore, and I saw what was happening with the band. Like, and all these women were on James. All these fans, like you could see there was a big groundswell of adoration for the band. So it was clear to me that they were at a point where they were going to break big. And that was before the Metallica show that we did, if I'm not mistaken. I could be chronologically off track, but anyway, it was clear to me at that point that they had reached a plateau, that they were obviously on their way. So, but did I think that, like with Anthrax, I knew they'd be gold or platinum. Did I think that Metallica would be who they are and where they are now? I mean, they are, it's unbelievable how big they are and how great they are. I just saw them I watched something they did, My Love Lies Bleeding by Elton John.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Freaking nailed it. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
What do you think of Lars as a drummer? He gets picked. I like him. Yeah, he's one of my favorite drummers, but he gets picked on so much now. And I guess today, because the today's drummers are a lot different than what he is or was back in his day.
He was so influential to so many young people,
right. Yeah, and the way people play drums now is completely different. So what do you feel about Lars?
Well, I think it's, when you say influential, absolutely right, because just like Peter Criss, not the best drummer in the world, but think how many drummers started because of Peter Criss.
Right.
I mean, I used to love, in that little drum break, I Just Want to Rock and Roll All Night,
Right.
where he's playing that thing and like, oh, that's cool, I love that. So Lars, without a doubt, influenced thousands of drummers. I personally have never borrow, like I steal from everybody, and I'm not ashamed to say that I steal from everybody, and I will continue to steal from everybody. So any drummers out there, if you're playing a lick that I'm actually capable of playing, which as drummers progress, I get less and less able to capture those things, but if you play a lick that's cool, I'll be playing it too. So, but with Lars, I've never taken any of his, like, I never thought, oh, that's a cool lick, but I like the way he plays. And I think Lars gets picked on a lot because Lars has been the vocal person in the band, and sometimes he was a young kid, and he'd say things, and I think people just picked on him because of that, because they kind of thought, well, shut up, you're a little arrogant.
Cockiness.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody loves that, and so. But anyway, I think a lot of times he gets ragged on for that. But I know Chris told me that he said that he goes, the drummer can, he struggles to execute it. He gets so down on himself, but he has really good ideas. He just can't execute them yet. He's just not good enough to execute them. So he works hard, but he gets them. And so, I think that's Lars. Lars has played a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we solved the issue of who was playing with Manowar was Virgin Steel.
Oh, okay.
It was not the Rods.
Okay.
How he got that mixed up, I don't know.
I have no idea.
I was worried that all the drugs I didn't take were kicking in.
Mitch Wooten said he saw the Judas Priest Vengeance tour with the Rods and Crocus. One of his favorite concerts he ever saw.
That's right. And Crocus was great. Crocus actually asked me, on that tour, they asked me a number of times to join the band.
Really?
And,
Yeah, they were kind of going through drummers there for a while, because they had an American drummer on the Headhunter tour.
Mm-hmm. And
in the book here, you were asked to join a couple of bands, but you didn't want to, do any other bands but the Rods. Is there a band that you wish that you would have went with that you turned down?
Any band that would have made me, $1 million and a huge star. I wish I'd gone with that band. No, I've been happy. People have asked me, like, why didn't you stay with Manowar? Do you have any regrets? I'm like, no, not for a minute.
Well, you would have had to wear the loincloth too, so.
The loincloth, being a loincloth would just cause a chain reaction of vomiting. But I think and I don't have any regrets about that. But I think it would have been fun to play with Brocas. I liked a lot of the songs. Mark Sirachi was a killer frontman. That would have been fun. I laugh about the Harry Chapin thing because I never would have been the right drummer, but it would have been a cool thing for me to do at the time. And I wanted a major label deal. I wanted to get to that next level. And, they asked me, Harry's looking to hire a drummer, would you consider auditioning? And two of the guys I'd already recorded with, and they were friends of mine. I was going to all these Harry Chapin shows. And I knew Harry somewhat to say hi to him, and I'd be at these backstage and no, I'm a rock drummer, no, I'm a heavy metal drummer, just dismissing it without even getting an audition, which would have been something that might have opened a lot of doors for me. But hey, I have to own the fact that I was young, stupid, and probably, and when I say arrogant, I hate to label myself as arrogant in the sense that I was this cocky, whatever. I was driven, and so sometimes that was it would be blinders on. Couldn't see anything else because I was so focused on getting from point A to point B, and I couldn't see a variation or any, variation of the plan. So, but I was arrogant. Just like you don't want to sound like Tigers of Pantang.
And then he goes off and does Thin Lizzy as well. Count Ralphus said we bring back to the Beyond the Gates album by Possessed. He says one of his favorite things that you produced, and he wants to know what the story is behind the intro to the album. It's a very epic intro on this album.
Jeff told me recently they still use that, but that was something I had written on keyboards, and so synthesizers were pretty new at the time. They were expensive, and so I couldn't wait to get in and play that on the synthesizer. So I wish I had orchestrated it differently, but it was quick and whatever. But I was glad to hear they still use it. Yeah. But it was just a piece. It was just something I had noodled on the keyboard and had written, and I thought, well, why don't I, offer this to them as an intro to the record?
Great, yeah.
What do you think of these new drummers today with the techniques? Like this drummer, I can't pronounce his name. I'm trying to see it. It's Esper. He plays with one hand. Have you ever seen? Thank you. There's another guy I can't pronounce. What do you think of that technique that he uses?
Oh my God,
he tightens up those skins really tight, and
he puts the weight on it, and you bounce the stick. You can see it.
Yeah.
You put the rim here, and then you bounce it. That's a technique that Ian Pace has used forever. Doing that in the early 70s. He was doing that in his drum solos. That's a jazz trick. Buddy Rich, a lot of the jazz drummers. That's been around forever. But yeah, it's phenomenal. When you tighten the drum heads that much, it's a lot easier to play certain things. But that's not his case. He's an extreme drummer. He's phenomenal. I love him. There's another guy too, and I can't think of his name. He's one of my favorites because he's hysterical. And he's a monster drummer, but he does these, he's Italian. I think he's Italian, maybe Spanish, but he does these things and he's like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then he works it out slowly. And then he plays it exactly the way the artist plays, super fast, super tight, deadly accurate. And then at the end, you'll like, boom, and it just, the explosion. But Estepario, he was the first one I saw do that. But yeah, a monster drummer. I mean, that type of extreme drumming is, mind blowing to me in one sense. And on the other, it holds no interest to me. Just like learning blast beats. I can play a certain amount of blast beats, but not, I have my own little way of playing them. But to sit and play fast blast beats has never interested me because I guess the music, the blast beats were accompanying just, didn't really connect with me. I love listening to it, but I didn't love playing it. So I was driven to play that. But I found that when the Rods got back together, the fact that like now there's so much info and there's so much when you're learning now from the beginning, you don't have to unlearn anything. You learn the proper techniques, you work on the muscle groups, and you can the drumming is amazing. It's very linear, lots of single strokes, fast single strokes. But, I like had to make peace with it. I said, I don't, like if I try to chase every new style of drumming now, I'll never catch it. It'll never be, I've worked years on my own style. So play what you know, play what you feel, which I did. And then I found that the young drummers that I was in awe of, we'd do these festivals, they were not necessarily in awe of me, but they had total respect. Dude, I love the way you play. Where did you learn that? Like there was this camaraderie with the drummers where nobody was going, yeah, I'm better than you are, or, I can play 210 beats, you can't even play 180. You suck. There was none of that. They were like, everybody was really complimentary. We all helped each other. It was, I found that there was a real brotherhood and sisterhood in that whole, the drum community. So they appreciated what I did. I appreciated what they did. And so that whole thing of chasing it just, for me, it was like, you know what? I made peace with it. I am what I am. And like Popeye, it's all that I am.
And you mentioned you mentioned blast beats, and Charlie Benante's I've heard been I guess the one that kind of introduced the blast beats. Do you think that's true? Do you think he's like the first one to do that?
Charlie was the first one I ever heard play it. You have to remember when he did Gung Ho. I had heard nothing that fast. His bass drums were so fast in Gung Ho at that time. And nobody played that fast. I mean, and not just that fast. He did it in one take. It just came out of the box on Mark and set go. And we were playing to a click track, and Charlie just freaking nailed it. And so I'd never heard anybody else play it. So Charlie introduced blast beats, very possibly so. I would not put money against it.
Yeah, he's my top favorite drummer, man. He's next to you, by the way. Anyway,
yeah. Thanks. Well, there might be a little spot on your nose.
What? No, what are you talking about? Stop it.
Yeah, Charlie's like I said, from day one when he sat down and played, it was like, wow, what a monster drummer.
Yeah.
And I'm critical of drummers. I'm critical of drummers because tempo is key, pulse is key, and having chops. Charlie's had it all.
Yeah.
Count Ralph said SOD is when he really did some crazy blast beats on the SOD album.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great album. I remember
that was a groundbreaking record for what it was as well.
It was. I remember Johnny telling me he had to kind of put the brakes on it a little bit because it was outselling Anthrax.
Yeah, but a lot of people think Anthrax did the first rap metal song, but it was actually Johnny Z, and you produced that, the metal rap. What was it? The Lone Ranger. I have that record. I should have drug it out. It was Johnny Z doing a rap, and you guys, the Rods, were the backing band on that track.
Right, and David didn't. We were in Music America, and David ran out of time, so I brought Duck in, and Duck played the solo because we had to do a whole instrumental side. So we just used the same music, and Duck plays solos. But yeah, Johnny Z was a riot, and Marsha conducted the chorus, brought in children, and conducted the children. It was a fun session.
Yep.
In the chat, Mitch Wooten says some killer drumming on the Rods, and the Raw used to piss his grandparents off, or his grandpa off, cranking it, and the song Hurricane.
I'm glad to hear that he was able to torture his grandfather. That makes me feel good.
And when I was reading your book, and I read the beginning of it, and it's it's kind of sad to hear that how you grew up with your parents were separating, and they send you off to some unknown people. Do you remember anything about that more than what you wrote in the book? Obviously,
yeah, there's a lot
you wrote in the book, but
there's a lot of that in the book. A lot of things that happened that I certainly remember all of it, and didn't put it in the book because that was enough to get everybody kind of get a sense of it wasn't the best start. That's why I titled the chapter "A Rough Start" because it was it wasn't the best start.
Yeah.
But it leads us to who we are, and my daughter and I are tight. I love my granddaughter. I'm so thrilled being a grandfather. She's only 6 months old, but it's wonderful. But it made me a better father. And everybody would always say, "You're such a great father." But I'm like, you know what? I'm not trying to be like, I'm trying to run interference for my daughter to avoid the shit I went through. That was my goal. Make sure she didn't suffer some of the crap and indignities that I suffered. And so that from day one, that was my goal. And if that made me a good dad, then so be it. But that was my goal. She wasn't going to, if I could help it on my watch, I wasn't going to let anything bad happen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was interesting too when you in the book you talk about moving away and completely kind of just getting out of the whole metal thing and living in this small town where nobody knew who you were. And then
Homeroom dad.
Oh, two fans spot you one day. Hey, are you Carl Canedy?
It's so funny because it's one on one end of the aisle and one on the other end of the aisle. And one of them goes, "Hey, are you Carl Canedy?" And then the other guy looks up. He's like, "Oh my God." But up until then, you're like, to put that in perspective, I was the homeroom dad. I was wearing an Oxford shirt. My hair was fairly short. And I would like, my daughter I was the guy bringing cupcakes. I was in the school, like with the kids. I was the homeroom mom. Except I was the homeroom dad. I was on the school bus when they go on field trips. That was me. I didn't want people to know my past. The last thing I want, and especially with my daughter, because sometimes I would take my daughter and her friends, and I'd take them to the movies, or we go to Discovery Zone or whatever. I would be the dad driving them. So I just thought, oh my God, parents see this guy, if they Google me, and they see this hairy, crazy looking jackass who's now driving their little daughters to Discovery Zone, thinking, oh man, this is not good. So that's when they called my name, I thought, oh man, I am outed now. This isn't good. No more cupcakes. I won't be bringing cupcakes to school anymore. They won't even let me in pretty soon.
Ralph's on mute. I just want to see if he wanted to say anything. He's on mute.
How's that leg doing, Ralph?
Hopefully he's all right.
Yeah, he must have really done a number on it.
Yeah, it's what happens when you get old, man. You just you know how that is, right?
Well, I'm old, but I try not to fall.
Ralph's very clumsy. He doesn't pay attention to what he's doing.
Yeah,
I think he will now.
I think so.
Yeah.
Hopefully he will.
Um,
in the chat, he didn't want to. He's not. Where did the thing go? Everything just moved on it now. Where did it go? Oh, here we go. About your he says, Carl, don't be mad, but you used to be kind of on the heavy side. How did you change your lifestyle? Because obviously now you got yourself in shape here now, and so
who is this asshole? I want his name.
I don't know. He said he doesn't want to give his name.
I'm kidding.
Just the same guy that thought you opened for.
But I do have his address. If you want his address,
I want to know where
Chris.
he is. I'm going to kick his ass. No, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Of course, I was on the heavy side, and my weight has fluctuated throughout the years. I think and there was a point in COVID where I would say 45 to 50 pounds heavier than I am now. We were just talking about it yesterday with my son-in-law. And I was lying in bed and I'm like, oh my God, when the Warrior album for Canedy was coming out, and I would remember lying in bed going, oh my God, I can't live like this. And I don't know what to do to get the weight off.
Yeah.
So because it's not like I'm inactive, I mean, I play, I move my body, I use some weights. So what I did was I would read things and I thought, it's got to be something I can live with. So then I was reading about intermittent fasting. And I thought, yeah, that's crap. But what I did do was, instead of eating 7 meals a day and desserts, I cut back on that. And that seemed to help quite a bit. But the thing I would do is I would try to eat as early as possible at night. And I still try. It's not always possible. I try to eat as early as possible and then not eat anything else until breakfast. So I'd try to be done by 5 or 6, and I would, get up at 7:30, 8. I wouldn't eat breakfast till 8, sometimes 9. So I suppose that was a form of intermittent fasting. But if I woke up in the middle of the night, I might go get a big bowl of cereal. And excuse me, I don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm done eating at supper, then that's it. I'm done. Excuse me, I'm getting hiccups. I'm done. But it was really starting to look at. I noticed the other day, I said, geez, I've had this weight off now for over 2.5 years. And today I looked at the scale and I thought for a minute it was 179. I'm like, I'm trying to get down to 175. And it was like 179.9 something or 178.8 or something. And I was like, wow, I've got to take a picture. So I go to grab my phone to get back on scale. It's 180.3 or 180.4. And it would knock. I'm like, come on, go back to 170s. I'm like, it's 180. I'm like, yeah.
You must have got up in the middle of the night and ate some cereal.
So yeah, so that's right. So it's been a process of changing how I eat, and I noticed that I hardly ever eat bread anymore. But it's not it wasn't a conscious thing. So I wouldn't say it was a big diet change, but I will say that it was. I try to watch what I eat, and I try to eat healthy anyway. So try to load up more on vegetables and fruits but whatever. I'm hoping, but I have been able to keep it off all this time. So I'm hopeful that it won't balloon up again. But thanks for embarrassing me, humiliating me about
hey, I have a weight problem too. I'm fat too. So it's all right.
He didn't fat shame you, he fat shamed me. No, I'm kidding. I don't know who he is, but I'm just busting. I'm fine.
Well, when you were a fat bastard, no. Did you like when you did have some weight on you, did you have problems like playing drums sometimes at points at all?
No.
No?
Sweat more.
Yeah.
In fact, I just had a good friend of mine as a cardiologist. And so we've been good friends for over 10 years. But just recently, probably 6 months, I have a really good cardiologist here. And but she said, why don't you come and see me? My friends, are my patients. And I said, well, I wasn't sure. He goes, no, it's okay. So I switched. And she said, we should do a workup on you. So she did every test possible. I know my other doctor had told me my carotid were like really clear. He goes, they shouldn't be that clear. So she did a whole, all the tests on my aorta and everything, and everything's clear. Everything was good. Like it's been good, and my EKG and whatnot. So, and I play, and my stamina's good, and so I mean, I'm knock on.
Yeah, that's what you've been playing forever, so I think that's what helps.
Yeah,
I stopped playing for a couple of years, and then going back to it, and then gaining weight and everything. It is hard, and I play probably a couple times a week, and I still can't get into the rhythm I used to have, where I was a lot heavier, and I was still able to play and not have like fatigue. But I can't get back into. I'm starting to lose weight now, thankfully, but I can't wait to get back into that routine where I don't get exhausted playing an AC/DC song or something stupid.
Yeah, anybody who's had a weight issue, it's not easy. I've never had stamina's never
especially
been
with ice cream around.
Yeah, but stamina's never been an issue for me. I've always had really good stamina, and I think that's from playing balls out drums forever. So
that's right. Yeah,
and I would always when we were doing we were gearing up for tours, I would just walk and do some weights. I would just do cardio and to try to prepare myself, because my joke has been, but I don't think it's not that far from being true, make it a joke. My fear is I'll be doing my drum solo, and the next thing I know, it'll be clear, and I'll see the paddles coming toward me. So I try to get the cardio in before I do any major gigs.
I think you'll be all right. And Chris Flood said he never meant to say anything bad about you, but I'm gonna give him your address, Carl. So I mean, Chris. So
Yeah, no, I want the address. I'm showing up, and I know he didn't. Let him know.
I think he did. I think he did. A lot
I think
of these,
it was a valid. Well, that's on you. You're giving him a hard time. I'm forgiving. I'm cool. I own it. I was glad I was able to lose the weight.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool. Very cool. Carl, do you remember the band? I can't see it because a stupid YouTube heart is there. Mars from Pennsylvania.
Yeah. The band Mars?
Mars, yeah.
No, sounds familiar, but no, I can't think offhand.
How about the
Should
Canedy?
I know them?
Mars. Remember the Candy?
Yeah.
Mars bar?
Bars, yeah.
You have any of those under your mattress, Carl? Huh?
Not anymore. I think I mailed them to your house.
You probably did. Let's see, what else are they talking about in here? They're talking about the height of Dan Lilker from Anthrax still.
Danny's a tall boy.
He is a tall boy. No, that's it. I think everybody's caught up in the chat. Anything else, Tony?
No, It's been great having you, Carl. Just like I said, been a big fan for years. Glad you were able to do this, and I really did enjoy the book.
Yeah, the book is really good. Everybody needs to go out and buy it.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. There's some great stories in there, and I mean, we talked a lot about some of the bands that you produced, but Carl goes in a lot more detail in the book on these stories. He just kind of gave us just a little bit of inkling of what, each one that I ask about. And there's some other bands in there that we didn't even cover, like TT Quick and several others that he worked with. Yeah. So I highly recommend it.
This was fun.
Yeah.
And like I said, I liked all the interviews from the people that you have worked with too, and it really made the book very interesting because not a lot of people do that stuff in the book. So it's really cool. And then find out you haven't even read that stuff yet. So I suggest you go and read that and see what.
Yeah,
people
you need to
really
go check it out. Everybody was really nice to you, man. They gave you props, big time.
Well, that makes me feel better. Now I'm not afraid to read it. But yeah, I just didn't want it to taint anything I was doing.
I'm looking forward to the new Rods record too, coming out later this year, maybe.
I'm excited about it. I'm hoping it'll come out in January. In fact, tomorrow I'll try to contact the label about just that.
Awesome. Cool. And where can people go and buy the book?
It's New Haven Publishing, so they can go to they can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you buy books online. It's there. Now there's a PDF file or a Kindle version of it, as well as the book. And I'm working on the audiobook, but they can go to wherever. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and also if they want an autographed copy, they can go to cmsmgmt@aol.com and they can PayPal me through that, and I will send them an autographed book.
Oh, wow,
very cool. Very cool. Very cool. So guys, please go out and go do that right now. Right? As soon as the show's over, go do that. You'll enjoy the book, I promise.
Yeah, great read for sure.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you guys. Appreciate
Thank you, Carl. Thank you,
Ralph, I guess, is just hanging in there. This show's going to be on all night long.
The meds must have kicked in for Ralph.
Well, Ralph's got to shut us down, or we just keep
we're
going.
just going to be on here all night long.
Yeah. I love Ralph. He's a great guy. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot,
Carl. Thank you very much for coming on. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, man.
Talk to you soon.
I really enjoyed it.
All right.
Take care.
Take care of yourself. Bye.
Thanks, man.
Bye.
All right. Very cool, Tony. Ralph, where are you? We're done. I think he fell asleep, Tony.
I sent him a text and said, "Hey, are you still awake?" I just want to make sure he didn't fall asleep.
I think he passed out.
He said he would shut us off.
Oh, there he is. There he is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't talk, man. I had my niece here and I had to put my shit on mute.
That's all right. We heard you yelling, screaming in the background.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to put my shit on mute, and then I did. So
it was all good.
It was all good. A really cool show. And
yeah, I was listening, but I just couldn't talk.
Yeah, great.
Oh, did I turn it off? I didn't turn it off.
No, we're still here. We're still here.
Hey, everybody, thank you. I'll be back next week, sitting down, I hope.
Next week, as far as I know, we're going to have John Gallagher from Raven.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Schmack, oh my God. I'm sorry I couldn't be here this week, but I will be back next week, I hope.